Hello everyone, welcome to Novem's final project presentation. My name is Erin Harrison, I'm the director and level designer. In my team we've got Daniel Dutton, who is our animator and game designer, Callum Walters, who is our producer and 3D artist, Praveen Satkunam, who is our 3D character and lighting artist, Maria Robertson, who is our animator and rigger, Louise Caliango, 3D artist, James Cooper, our other 3D artist, and Shanna Rodriguez, who is our outsourced concept artist. What is Novem? Novem is our 2.5D sci-fi PC game. So, you play as an alien detective who is uncovering the secret of a post-apocalyptic Earth. So, for our prototype, we have made 2 out of a possible 9 levels. Those are the outskirts and the power plant. So this is the walkthrough of our game, Novem. You can see we have this really lovely loading screen that is actually a separate level with the scouts in the background. And we overlaid that with a separate HUD just so that we could get some motion in the background. We tried a static image and we found that we didn't like it as much. We wanted something that could draw your eye and we thought the animation would work. These are our 2 levels. As I said earlier, we've got the outskirts and we've got the power plant. And yeah, if we jump in game, we'll show you what we've got. You'll just see in a moment, we have this lovely loading screen that was done by Callum. And yeah, I think it's really nice. So here we are in the outskirts. So you can immediately see, as we'll go on later, we have a lot of inspiration from Simon Stallenhag and from Nick's staff with this really moody, eerie, kind of cloudy blue lighting. We also have these focal points with the beacons in the background, just because I guess universally across the game we have this visual language of something really small and something really big with this huge titan-like objects. This entire scene that we're coming up to now in the barn was built by Callum, and it was set dressed by, I believe, Callum and Dan, and we tweaked it a little. So here we can see the captions with the press F to use the lever, press the E to use detective mode. We just want to guide the player through. We don't want them to really get lost, so we're kind of just nudging them along slightly. Just here you'll see press W to jump and to use our traversal feature. And anywhere that we have any traversing throughout the environment like that, we have those blue dashes just to show the player that this is where you can do this thing, just so that they don't get lost. So you can see here that the player has turned on the generator and they're now going back inside, and they should be able to flick the lever so you can see it red from red to green. And at that moment we have the light on the crane turn on, and we have this beautiful lighting from the fans as well. So this is one of our hero shots that we love just because it encompasses the game quite perfectly. You can see again those huge beacons, the beautiful eerie lighting that Praveen put together quite beautifully, and this RV that Callum designed. And again, we have this running use of foreground elements just to make sure that we're staging the scene correctly. And now we're reaching the house. So we have another puzzle. So press E for detective mode. You can see the key. Press F to pick up the key. I guess the player is going to ignore it. They're going to try the door. We initially didn't have a puzzle in the house, and we found that you didn't get the time to appreciate it. So we added this puzzle, I think it was like this week or last week, just to kind of force the player to stay within this environment so they can't just run out. We also want the player to head upstairs, as you'll see in a minute. So this house was built initially by Callum, and Louise edited it. She also did a great job at adding all these panels and these really fine details, just because we were aware that when you use detective mode, you can see everything. So we had to be very clear with when we were modeling and the kind of making sure our assets were really, geometry was really well done. just because we're aware that you can see everything. It's not like anything is hidden. So in this house, you can see that he's just found the key by using detective mode from going from the master bedroom to the children's bedroom. And you should now be able to traverse downstairs and try the front door. There's a little, I really like the lighting on the TV here just because the way that it lights up that little light there. So again, use detective mode to find clues. But this time we've spotted an enemy that is red. Those are our scouts. If you'll just see in a moment when the player runs past, they're going to run after you and very fast. So you want to get out of there. So off he goes. You can run over with the nav mesh and the way that Dan designed the scouts. They're always following you and looking for you. So they're going to go over the bridge and they won't jump into the river just because there's nowhere for them to walk in the river. They have to go over the bridge. But here they are, stuck by the wall. You're saved. You can see that in the forest, the way that I set dressed this, I wanted it to be really lush, really organic, really full. This landscape was designed by Callum and I went in with the trees and I added a bit of the hillside at the very end. So with this space, we have this tree that you saw earlier and we have the arrow just pointing you forward. We also have this graveyard just to fill up the space and this wonderful shot of the crane. Callum came up with this lovely idea. It was animated by Dan and we think it kind of draws your eye and shows off the cranes a little nicer. This is also one of our hero shots. We have a lens flare just kind of like pointing at the player and then you like run underneath the crane as well just so you can see it here. And just in the background we have all these trees just to fill that space. So the idea in this environment is that the cranes are kind of felling the trees in this area for the ICO power plant. So you can see all those trunks and all those broken dead trees. It's quite sad. So this is another hero shot where you can fully appreciate the power plant. Initially we didn't have that and it's quite flat ground and you ran straight up to the power plant and we found that you didn't really get to appreciate the model as much. We have that little jump down just to tell the player that you can go down here without breaking your legs. And then now that we enter the power plant in a minute, we will finally leave the outskirts behind. So yeah, off we go. So the power plant was designed by myself, and what happened with this block out is once it was done, we put it in Unreal and the 3D team went in and they absolutely smashed it when they were filling it up with props. They would export each of the 6 separate rooms that you'll see in a minute and they would fill it up in Maya and give those references to Dan so that he could set dress the environment. There is some beautiful shafts of light just to point out here that Piravine put together. And yeah, we have this caption, instead of it being on a do once in the blueprint, it happens repeatedly just so that you don't miss it. We don't want the player to kind of miss that they can jump back. Yeah, I guess now you're going to see an enemy. So you're spotted by one of the scouts here and you're also spotted by a seer and he's going to run after you. So I don't think the player should be lingering. Oh gosh. So you can see here that they could see that they needed to jump up because of those blue dashes. And yeah, now we have the pistons. This was initially suggested by Tom Hall in one of our earlier feedback sessions. I think it was in the last presentation actually when the power plant was still very much at early stages. And oh gosh, he died. It's quite a gruesome death. But it's nice to show that when you respawn at this point, you go back to this point just before the locker rooms, and then you have to do this again. I'll point out that we tried having the the spawn point, the checkpoint up here just now, but we found that it didn't really work very nicely because the camera jumped, so that's why you go back to the start. So hopefully the player should get through this. I am really bad at playing this point, but he's done it. And look, we have this beautiful shot of the fuel cell. This hero asset was designed by Callum and textured by Callum, I believe, in Substance Painter. And if we jump down here, we get a lovely view of the power plant. And then we have this lift mechanic that caused us grief for a while, but Dan managed to fix it, and I'm very happy that he did. If we run all the way through, you get your mission for the section, that you want to activate the crane so you can pass the scouts in your in the foreground. So if we look at the cranes, I love this shot. Like I said earlier, I designed this space, and I believe it was Callum and James that helped put together and set dress this environment. So yeah, if we go in here, we are now in the back office, and when you press F, you can clearly see that something's wrong. You can't actually launch the crane yet. So what are we going to do? So at this bit, they should realise that there's nothing for them to do here. They need to go back down. And then again, we have this lift. So yes, they should go down. I love that little bob that it does. So we're now in the basement, and this is our main puzzle for Novem. We have this little simple puzzle that Dan designed, and I really like it just because it kind of gives a little more interactivity to the game instead of you pressing one button. We wanted the player to be able to get things wrong and have to redo things. So you can see here that they're going to try and solve the puzzle, but they got it wrong. So you can see on the screen in the background here that it says the 1 and the 2, so self-explanatory. Let's see if they can get it. That design was put together by Dan. This environment was set dressed by Callum and James. They split this area into 2, and then I put the UI captions in here. So yeah, they've solved the puzzle. Hooray! Now you should be able to go back upstairs and launch the crane and make your escape. So let's go back upstairs. I guess when we're talking about the colour in this scene, I should point out we had some issues with saturation, and I'm quite pleased that we had to go and desaturate all the colours in this area, and I think that the 3D team did a really good job at bringing that vision to life, just because the colours weren't working particularly well. We wanted to have this uniform look throughout, and there were a lot of tweaks done this week, I'll say that. I really love the blinds, this lighting here. It was put together by Peravine, but I remember, I think it was Callum that suggested this, just to break up the blinds so that we could have different variations of lighting in this space. So yeah, I guess we'll go back downstairs, have a little more exploring. And you can see this tunnel section. I wanted just to break up the space a little more, just because the previous iteration of the space was literally just 2 rooms on top of each other, and I spent a long time researching particular power plants. I found one in Russia and one in Arizona that I used to model this power plant off of, just because I wanted it to structurally make sense and feel like an actual place that would make sense in the real world. So having the spaces like the tunnels and those like crane storage, it made sense to have something like that. So yeah, back here the camera pans out just so you can see some of those offices. And yeah, if we jump up, oh no, more scouts. You want to reach the crane, but they are all going to come out and try and kill you. So hopefully he's going to get out. I don't know if he is, because he's walking very slowly. Oh, close call. So here again we have those dashes so that the player knows that this is somewhere that they can traverse, and now they get to control the crane. Ooh. So you can see here that we have a nice clearer shot of those giant arms, I think they were rigged by Maria and animated by Maria. They were designed by Callum. This space was set dressed by both Callum and James, lighting by Pyravine, and you see some of the scouts that Dan animated here. With the detective, all the anim was done by Maria, and I really should have said earlier, we love his idol. He does this really lovely thing with his hands where he just looks kind of pressed that you're not moving him along fast enough. And that's a really lovely anim and a lovely little detail that she did. So, yeah, I guess the player is having a wonderful time destroying scouts right now. And then we can see that we're reaching the blinding light at the end of the power plant. And if we walk towards the light, we'll finally reach the end of Novem. Are we here? We've arrived. And where are we? We are going to be placed outside the city. It was one of our stretch goals to be able to enter the city, but we had to scale back. But at least you can look at it now. We can reuse this model. But yeah, this is our final shot, and I hope you like our final product. I will say I'm really proud of the team for crunching through this, especially under the conditions of COVID. I'll say again that with, if I run through everyone, Callum led the 3D team really well, especially pulling off the hero assets. Dan did a fantastic job at animating the scouts and doing the game design. Maria was fantastic at rigging and doing all the sound effects that you can hear. And both Louise and James did an admirable job at putting together their assets. And Pyravine, wonderful lighting. So yeah, I hope you like our project.
These are all the character designs. Before starting any models, I will create some concepts to help me get some direction to what it should look like. I'll do some research on objects from real life to make the concepts more grounded in reality. We also had some external concepts from Shanna. I was given references that had parts highlighted that should be incorporated into my design, mainly it being a huge squarish robot that cuts and collects wood. After getting the concept approved, I brought it into Maya to model it and textured it in Substance Painter.
The next planning stage was to create the art Bible. This is something that I continuously worked on throughout the project. You can see here for the outskirts, I looked at art by Nick Staff and Stannenhag again. I also looked at stills from games like The Witcher and photography of actual forests, just so I can get a concise image of what I wanted for the outskirts. You can see here it's very green, very organic, very moody, and the colour scheme we were looking for. For the power plant, we were going for more of an industrial and sci-fi aesthetic. I looked at games like Halo, but I also looked at actual plants and factories to get the exact models that I wanted, such as those like claw-looking machines, just because we needed those exact props that rendered down into a low-poly style. I tried to find references with lighting that would closely match what would actually be in the scene, just so that the props would be closely aligned with the vision that we wanted in the reference. For the level design, I'm going to go over the sketch to the final block out of the power plant. In this iteration, you can see last time that we had a space with 2 stacked rooms and a corridor in the middle for the scout to run after you. There are a couple of hazards and environmental puzzles, but I didn't like the fact that the path was very linear and the player didn't have much chance to explore the plant. In the next iteration, in this iteration, you can see that there are additional rooms for the player to explore and a more thoughtful path of exploration throughout this space. There are considerations for enemy locations and puzzle locations and environmental traps and hazards to avoid along their path. It isn't linear and they can choose to go into any of the rooms that they like. This is the final block out of the power plant level. This grey box model went through several rounds of iteration with Amadeo in the team. As those were happening, as soon as possible, we got the block out into Unreal so that the 3D team could export each of the 6 separate rooms and start kitting it out with props in Maya. And then the level designers could go in and build that back up in Unreal. So I'll quickly brush through that each of the 6 rooms are, you've got your entryway, the center room, you've got the basement, the back office, the scout storage, and the crane hangar. So once the level design was completed for the house and the barn, we asked Louise to do a paint over, just to do some sketches in Photoshop and give us some kind of idea of where we could place the props into the scene. You can see here how she has sketched out the bedroom and the kids' room, and it really helped when trying to find references, as once I went in there I could easily just follow the guide that she'd created and fill up the space quite efficiently.
The way we approached 3D modelling within this project was to first figure out what look we wanted. We wanted to go for a look that was low poly, stylised and sci-fi themed. The way we figured out how to model this was to first figure out what environment we wanted to fit the game. We would then look at references and concept art to create an asset list of what we feel like fitted within the environment. We would then create the assets and texture them. We would then import them into the blockout and create the environment around it. After that, we would do renders to show and get feedback on. Once we had got feedback on, we would then make the necessary changes needed for the environment. This could be changing textures or changing the model. Once we had done that, we would combine it all together to create the perfect environment for the game. Here are some of the final renders for the environment of the game.
The texturing in Substance Painter was pretty straightforward. I just basically imported the models and used a polygon fill tool to add like a basic colour. Then sometimes I would use the brushes to add a little bit of character and variation so it didn't look too flat. The most challenging part was probably kind of like exporting the house from Maya into Substance Painter, because the house had so many different objects. When I combined and exported from Maya, I didn't reapply one shader, so it wouldn't create as many shader sets in some Substance Painter. Although this was useful because it enabled me to be able to access different parts of the house, it meant that when I was exporting the house in Substance Painter and I was exporting this textures, it took a little bit more time than it would. So that's definitely something to consider next time.
In our production plan, we created a texture list with priorities where we could decide which assets got Substance Painter, which assets would be done in Photoshop, kind of to a medium detail, and then which assets we could actually utilize in Unreal to texture the asset.
I was tasked to create the animation for the main bad guys, the Scouts. We used human IK, which simulated the bone structure of a human, which worked great for the Scouts as they were heavily based off robots from Boston Dynamics who used human-like features. Once the animation was done, I imported them into Unreal Engine using FBXs, then applying these to the skeletal mesh of the Scout. From these animations, I created blend spaces and animation blueprint. We introduced a playable crane into the last section of the game, which needed its own set of animations like the Scouts. The process of adding these to Unreal Engine was the same as before, importing the animations as FBXs and applying them to the skeletal mesh. The animation is using a basic state machine with a simple blend space blueprint. I wanted to convey a heaviness to the crane as it was more than 15 times the size of any other character in the level, but also whilst keeping the head straight to keep any character on whilst they control it. In the video, I'm demonstrating the crane walking in our environment, killing Scouts below, showing its true scale and power.
Our choice of control rig for our characters was using the human IK system. This allowed us to quickly generate controls when testing and re-rigging, as well as easily edit animations within the real-time motion builder, as well as Maya. The crane was one of our more detailed rigs, which was fitted with custom controls for its unique parts. The chainsaw uses an expression to define the speed of the blades with an integer without having to animate it continuously. Additionally, set-driven attributes and aim constraints allow for master controls that can move multiple parts at once, which can still be individually offsetted as needed. This is the animation graph that defines the detective's locomotion when controlled by the player. You can see the relationships between each clip, which contain specific conditions for when and what they can transition to, such as whether they are in the air or are they traveling at a certain speed. We also included idle breakers for when the player is inactive.
Being the tech artist consisted of developing mechanic ideas into working blueprints within the game. Some examples here are the companion's Bob as he follows the detective around. This is done with a simple timeline and moving his world location up and down. Also detective mode, which has one of our biggest mechanics as it used materials, post-processing and variables communicating to other blueprints. I found it was very important to organise the blueprints with comments and later on colours to help us debug errors quickly. Here you can see a video of the player running through a hallway of pods. The player is activated sequences as they pass through trigger boxes. And the next video is a quick overview of the level blueprint for the level.
Simon Stelinak was one of my main inspirations for the lighting of the outskirts. The type of feeling I wanted to evoke was emptiness, loneliness, and most importantly, mystery. On the top right you can see early stages of the lighting, and on the bottom right you can see the final. For the power plant, I used alien isolation as inspiration. I wanted to make the environment seem like danger is lurking around the corner and that you're not safe. I also used the lighting to try and lead the player towards the right path.
Blueprinting was also used for specifying cues for sound effects. On the right is our template for defining our 5 types of materials that the footsteps can be affected by, being dirt, wood, water, carpet, and stone. Each material has at least 5 corresponding footstep sounds that will play randomly to create variation when walking. And on the left is how we would time various sound effects to build animation sequences, such as the crane walking through the woods, knocking down trees.
When it came to production, in the first module, we created a detailed plan of how we were going to approach the entire project. We created a time slot for each task that we would have to perform to complete the milestones we wanted to hit. I then assigned each of these tasks to the person with the most experience in that area. When making this plan, we tried to consider contingency if people took longer than expected. In hindsight, we were perhaps too ambitious with the task and should have been more realistic with our expectations. When making a plan like this, it is important to regularly update it as things change constantly throughout the project. It requires constant maintenance. When it came to the second module, in this module we had to reorganise and adapt to a new way of working. Whilst we had planned for minor contingency, I did not plan for a pandemic in the original calendar. Therefore, moving our workflow online and learning to collaborate remotely set us back severely. Major production shifts had to take place after the shutdown of the university. Whilst many of the original tasks were still able to be performed, many of the deadlines had to be heavily extended. We also suffered in this module due to a lack of pre-production before the project began. Certain tasks took much longer than expected and therefore set us back quite substantially. Any mistakes made in Module 1 started to become very apparent by the end of this module, having impactful knock-on effects. At the beginning of the last module, we felt it was important to re-evaluate our milestones based on the feedback we'd been given in the previous 2. We decided to prioritise the aesthetics of the game, dedicating our time to developing the visual aspects mostly, and only including the core mechanics of the game that are absolutely necessary. Due to the change in focus, we also introduced a new method in production in this final module. Instead of following the master plan, we instead used something similar to the Scrum method, a common production method used in games. Each day, I would collect the feedback tasks we were given that we'd received in dailies, and then I would organise it into a sprint backlog, which the team would then work through. This method ended up being very effective for the team, although in the future I would use a third-party software such as Trello opposed to Excel just for cleaner management. Since Escape closed its facilities, we have relied on social media platforms to communicate and hold meetings. We have a dedicated Discord server where we have the ability to screen share, allowing us to troubleshoot problems and update each other on our progress during the working day. We have also implemented multiple other sites that allow us to work from home more effectively. We have been using Facebook Messenger throughout the project, but it has become even more necessary now. Sync Sketch allows us to gain feedback from our tutor in the most effective way. It allows the tutor to sketch and leave comments on our work so to clearly illustrate what can be changed. We use Slack to both share references and assets with each other and give feedback on certain aspects of the project. Thank you for listening. Any questions?